So I was talking to someone the other day, and we were just talking about normal stuff. Like the nature of God and stuff like that. At some point, I said that God is irrational, and this dude gaslit me into questioning my own statement. There's something I really hate about ignorant skeptics. They can just refuse all the evidence in the world just because they don't feel like accepting the truth. But even skeptics can't deny the laws of logic. So that's why I made this video, to prove that God is irrational. Alright, let's get into omnipotence. It's one of God's most famous attributes. He has the power to do literally anything. However, when we delve deeper into what this really means, we encounter some challenges with logical contradictions. Consider the nature of logical contradictions. They occur when we assert something that inherently defies the basic principles of logic, like claiming that something can be true and not true at the same time. For example, I am here and not here simultaneously. Such statements are inherently self-defeating and cannot coexist within the framework of logical reasoning. Therefore, any concept or action that involves logical contradiction is, by its very nature, illogical. It violates the fundamental rules that govern rational discourse. Traditional definitions of omnipotence describe it as the capacity to perform any action, regardless of its nature. This includes actions that are logically impossible, such as creating a square circle or making a statement both true and false simultaneously. Essentially, omnipotence in its fullest sense suggests a power that transcends the bounds of logical constraint, allowing for the possibility of actions that defy our understanding of coherency and consistency. When omnipotence includes the ability to perform logically contradictory actions, it inherently involves embracing contradictions. For instance, if omnipotence allows for the creation of an object that simultaneously exists and does not exist, we enter a realm of paradox that logical frameworks cannot accommodate. Thus, omnipotence, when defined to include the performance of logically contradictory actions, inherently includes illogical contradictions. Given these premises, we can conclude that omnipotence, as traditionally defined to encompass the ability to do anything, includes the logically impossible, rendering it inherently illogical. It necessitates the acceptance of logical contradictions, which undermines its coherence with the framework of rational thought. So let's get into a quick example, something called the paradox of the stone. You've probably heard it before. Suppose that we posit God, being omnipotent, can create a stone so heavy that even he cannot lift it. This presents a direct challenge to the concept of omnipotence. If God can create such a stone, then there is something he cannot do: lift the stone. This limitation contradicts the idea of omnipotence, as it implies a restriction on his power. At the same time, if God cannot create a stone so heavy that he cannot lift, then there is something he cannot do: create the stone. This again contradicts the concept of omnipotence by imposing a limitation on his creative power. In both scenarios, we encounter a logical contradiction. Whether God can or cannot create the stone, there's something he can't do. This paradox effectively demonstrates that the traditional understanding of omnipotence, being able to do absolutely anything, leads to inherent contradictions. Thus, omnipotence, as traditionally conceived, appears to be logically incoherent. Alright, let's talk about another attribute we often ascribe to God: omniscience, or the state of being all-knowing. When combined with omnipotence, omniscience presents some intriguing and challenging paradoxes. Here's how. Omniscience is defined as having complete and infallible knowledge of everything that will happen. This means that an omniscient being knows every detail of the future with absolute certainty, much like having a flawless roadmap of all events that will ever occur. Imagine having a crystal ball that shows you every single thing that will happen in the future, without any chance of error. If you're omniscient, you see the future as clearly and certainly as you see the present. Omnipotence entails the ability to perform any action, including altering future events. This implies that an omnipotent being has the power to intervene in the course of events and change them at will. Think of it as having the ultimate superpower, where no future is fixed. and you can alter any event just by deciding to do so. If you're omnipotent, you can rewrite the future like editing a script. So, if an omniscient being knows that a particular event will happen with absolute certainty, then this event is fixed in the future. If it could be changed, the initial knowledge would be incorrect, which contradicts omniscience. So therefore, if omniscient knowledge is to be accurate, the future must unfold exactly as known. Consider predicting that a friend will call you at exactly 3 p.m. tomorrow. If you know this with certainty, then it must happen precisely at 3 p.m. for your knowledge to be correct. Any change to this prediction means you didn't actually know it with certainty. Given these premises, we arrive at a logical conflict. If a being knows the future with absolute certainty, then the future is fixed and unchangeable. However, if a being can change any aspect of the future, then the future is not fixed. This leads to the conclusion that omniscience and omnipotence, as traditionally defined, are logically incompatible, because the certainty of knowledge about the future contradicts the ability to change it. So let's consider a quick scenario involving both omniscience and omnipotence. Imagine God knows with absolute certainty that a person, let's call him John, will decide to take a walk tomorrow. God's omniscience means he knows that John will take a walk tomorrow. This knowledge is certain and can't be wrong, because he's omniscient. For God's omniscience to be intact, John must take the walk as foreseen. At the same time, God's omnipotence means he has the power to change this event. If he decides, he could make John stay at home instead. For God's omnipotence to be intact, he should be able to alter the event and prevent the walk from happening. If John takes the walk, this aligns with God's omniscient knowledge, but implies that God did not or could not use his omnipotence to change the event, suggesting a limitation on his power. But if John does not take the walk, this demonstrates God's omnipotence in altering the event, but it contradicts his omniscience, meaning his certainty about the future was incorrect. Okay, next is omnipresence. This is a tougher concept, but it's one that essentially means God is fully present everywhere at all times. So let's break it down. Omnipresence is traditionally understood as God's ability to be entirely and fully present in every location in space and every moment in time simultaneously. This means that God is not only everywhere in the universe, but also exists completely in every moment from the past through to the future. Imagine having the ability to be in every room of your house, every building in your city, and every spot on Earth all at once. Not just a part of you, but your full self, completely present in each place simultaneously. Different locations in space are separate and do not overlap. If you're present in one location, you are not present in another location in the exact same way. Consider two distinct places, like New York and Tokyo. If you are fully in New York, you are not in Tokyo. Being fully present in both at the same time without division creates a paradox. Being fully present means occupying a location entirely. If you are fully present in one place, you are completely there, not divided or spread out among other places. Think about water in a glass. If you pour all the water into one glass, it's completely there. You can't say the same water is fully in another glass simultaneously without having a contradiction. Time as we experience it flows in a linear sequence from past to present to future. Each moment flows from the previous one in a continuous progression. Our experience of time is like reading a book. You can only read one page at a time in sequence. You can't be fully engaged with all pages simultaneously. Full presence in a specific moment means existing entirely within that moment in time. Being spread across multiple distinct moments simultaneously contradicts the linear progression of time. Imagine trying to be fully present at your birth, your graduation, and your current age all at the same time. Each of these moments is distinct and separate. Being entirely in each one simultaneously defies how we understand time to work. First, we have spatial contradiction. Being fully present in multiple distinct locations at the same time violates the mutually exclusive nature of physical space. You can't be completely in one place and completely in another without dividing your presence. Then we have a temporal contradiction. Being fully present in all moments of time simultaneously contradicts the linear progression of time. Each moment is distinct, and full presence in one moment means existing entirely in that moment. So here's a quick example to illustrate the concept. Imagine a being, let's call him Omni, who is supposed to be omnipresent. Let's see how this plays out in the spatial and temporal context. Omni is fully present in room A. According to the definition of full presence, Omni's entire being occupies room A. If Omni is also fully present in room B, then Omni's entire being is in both room A and room B without division. This creates a contradiction because one entity cannot occupy two distinct and separate spaces entirely at the same time. It's like saying you're entirely New York and Tokyo at the same time without being divided. Here's another example. Omni is fully present at 3 p.m. today. Full presence at 3 p.m. means Omni is entirely engaged with and existing in the moment of 3 p.m. If Omni is also fully present at 4 p.m. and at 2 p.m. simultaneously, then Omni's entire being exists in multiple distinct moments of time at once. This defies the linear nature of time, where each moment is separate and follows from the previous one. It's like saying you're entirely experiencing yesterday, today, and tomorrow all at once. Alright, now we're at immutability. This is the idea that God is unchanging and unchangeable. Think of it as God being the ultimate constant, where nothing about his nature, attributes, or purpose ever changes over time. But when we get a bit deeper into it, we hit some interesting paradoxes. When we say God is immutable, we mean that God's nature and essence are eternally constant. Nothing about God changes, not his intentions, actions, or attributes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So imagine, for instance, a rock that doesn't erode. It never changes shape, and it remains exactly the same no matter what. That's essentially what immutability means. Complete and total unchangeability. When you do something, you move from one state to another, like shifting from being still to running, or from not speaking to having a conversation. Actions involve changes in conditions or statements. Think about flipping a light switch. When the switch is off, the room is dark. Flipping it on changes the state from darkness to light. It's a clear transition from one condition to another. But here's the crux of the problem. If God is truly immutable, then he can't change. But engaging in any action implies change, even if it's just the transition from deciding to act to the act itself. So if God acts, he either changes, which contradicts his immutability, or he somehow acts without changing, which contradicts the nature of action itself. Imagine trying to wave your hand while keeping it completely still. It's impossible. Waving inherently involves movement and change. Similarly, for God to act without changing is a contradiction. Given these premises, we hit a logical wall. If God is immutable, he can't change. But if he engages in actions or interactions, change is involved. Therefore, immutability, defined as being completely unchanging, is logically incompatible with the concept of engaging in actions. So let's try an example to illustrate this. Imagine God deciding to create the universe. Before creating the universe, God exists without having created anything. This is a state of non-action regarding creation. Picture an artist sitting with a blank canvas. Before painting, they haven't made any changes to the canvas. God decides to create the universe. This decision and subsequent action move from a state of non-creation to creation. The artist begins to paint. This is a clear change from having a blank canvas to one with paint on it. If God is immutable, he should remain unchanged, which means he should always be in the same state. But deciding to create the universe and actually creating it involves a change from not acting to acting. For the artist, staying immutably seated without moving their brush means the canvas remains blank. To paint means they have to move and change the state of the canvas. So, if God remains in the same state and does not change, then he can't engage in actions like creating the universe. If God does engage in actions, such as creating the universe, then he changes from a state of non-action to action, contradicting his immutability. Thus, the concept of an immutable God engaging in actions is logically contradictory. So, I want to be extremely clear about this. Saying God is irrational is not meant in the derogatory sense. It's not an attack. When I say irrational, I simply mean just beyond rationality, or illogical. That's exactly what I demonstrated in this video. So there you have it. And one more thing. Don't let people gaslight you into believing something that's wrong. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.